Everybody on here coming to you with this month's Connecting Codes video. This is where we look at things that uh, will be happening in our world, or, at least what the energetic patterns are showing are likely to come up. And I'll be looking at what we've got going on for August 2026. For those that don't know me, I am the author of this book right here, The Code Journey. Every year I put out a new edition, and I'm just about to release the 10th edition on this book, which is the Code Journey for 2027. And it's kind of exciting to think it's been 10 years already of doing this work. And of course, the geopolitical channel hasn't been going on that long. This channel hasn't. But, if you like this video, please like it, share it out, and subscribe to the channel because, as you can see, I'm a pretty small channel, but I do have people who like to know what is happening, what they might expect will be coming up in relation to world events and things that are going on. I do want to clarify this is not a predictive thing, so it's not like fortune telling or tarot cards or things like that. You see so many people out there, and I'm actually looking at the energetic currents that are present, and I integrate over 50 different modalities. And keep in mind that when I'm doing these videos, it's not just a current thing. I actually am pulling the information from my book, which I wrote over a year ago. So this is stuff that, I put together a long time ago, and now it's playing out in the world. And it's always kind of fun too to know that I created something, that long ago and year and a half ago. And then all of a sudden, here we are on top of it in live time and watching it play out, which is kind of fun. So every month I put one of these videos out because I have people, like I said, that are interested in hearing, hey, what's coming up? What do we need to be prepared for that our world is going to be dealing with over the next month? And some of this will be changing with the 2027 version, but we've still got, 5 months to go here in 2026. So um, in recording this, it's always getting out a little bit early before the end of the month, so you have plenty of time to listen and check into it. But this month we have a couple of core themes, which is learning how to get stronger and corruption exposes itself. And some of these themes that we're dealing with in August is going to be really present a lot actually in 2027. Only 2027 is as I tell people, just, strap on tight because you haven't even begun to see wild till we come into 2027. And it is going to get wild. We're probably going to get everything thrown at us in 2027 from what I've seen. I mean, pretty much you name it, it's going to be there. And a lot of this has to do with some of the themes we're looking at this month. And that is because when evil, corruption, whatever you want to say, not so nice people, unethical people are going down when they're losing power, they can get very nasty and very mean. And when they have nothing else to lose, they're going to take down as many people as they can in the process. And they're going to fight and kick and scream. I'm sorry, but the bad guys don't just go, oh, okay, I give up and we're done. Not like that in the world of corruption. That's not how they play the game. So let's get going here on August, what we can expect for August 2026. And in the overall month energy of it, we have a lot of learning from our experiences. And this is something that you want to kind of take hold of and say, well, what are we experiencing in the world? What are these experiences that we're having? And, it's very strange because this is the first time, really where I've seen people so politically involved, so involved in what's happening in the world. And I think that's a mixture of good things and not so good things, because I think when we become overly involved in things that, aren't even applying to us necessarily, that, we lose our divine connection a lot of times, or we become so absorbed we forget to live in life. On the other hand, we are living in times where we have to be aware of things, and it's important to be aware not just of what's happening in our own backyard, which is important, but also what's happening on a global level, because what's happening on that global level also is going to affect what happens in our own backyard. So always these things I find that information is really important if we want to have foresight to work with, if we want to know what we need to do in our own lives. And the more we know about what's happening, then the more we can um, bring our own life together in a way that we can deal with whatever's happening. So always these mixed pieces when we get into this arena, this geopolitical arena, world affairs arena in here. But we want to look at our experiences this month and say, what are we learning? What are these things teaching us? What is the lessons that are coming up? And there's always so many, depending on where somebody is sitting, what their position is in society, um, what is happening. It affects everybody differently. And, one of the things I was thinking today is, we could be strong and kind. We can do both. And I think, that has a lot to do with setting boundaries, a lot to do with holding our ground. But we don't have to be just so cruel and so mean to people. And I think that's one of the things that's hitting a lot of people is the level of cruelty that people are doing with each other. It's not a conversation. It's not basic discourse anymore discussing a topic. It's just how badly can we verbally abuse somebody? And I don't think that that's a good thing, honestly. There are definitely even leaders out there. They may not like a lot of people, but they don't always sit around abusing them. Their poor comments get really highly publicized, but they'll even talk very favorably about their enemies. And I think that that's the thing that we have to kind of come into. There's a very fine line between putting somebody in their place and holding boundaries and just being downright unnecessarily cruel. And so I think our experiences are going to be teaching us a lot. And I think that, we can certainly put an end to what is corruption, what is not favorable in the world without having to be so abusive in the process of it. Um, this month also has a lot to deal with false prophets and gurus, and we have a lot of exposure coming up. Going to see this a lot next year too, with people in the religious arenas, the spiritual areas of life. And I know this will hit some people hard because there's a lot of people that are not ready to hear how their spiritual gurus and idols and primary figures in the world have been deceiving them or are involved in really major corruption. And I think this is always a hard thing. And again, these are people that a lot of people grew up with. I could say even Jessie, when she was here instead of me, um, she was, she followed a lot of big name people because that's the people you see. That's the people that the stores buy. That's the people that are in your face. You don't often get to connect with some of the really real and genuine teachers out there. And so you kind of get drawn into that. And like anything, when you're young, you look at these people and go, ooh, look at how big they've made it. And look at all the promises that they're making that my life will be easy and I'll be powerful and all of these components that we draw to when we're young, right? Because whether it's insecurities or whatever else. But I see a lot that is going to be coming out around the prophets and the false prophets and the gurus and the spiritual arenas and the religious arenas. And we know that a lot of people, there are a lot of so-called ministers. I don't know if I can even really call them that, or a lot of church groups that have been very, very political. We've seen the Unitarian Church, for example, used to be very open-minded. They used to be this very kind of border between religion, very God focused, but very open minded about different things like meditation and different ways to connect with God and music and a variety of different things. And now they've really gone to this political extremist. But we also have very other, big noted reverends and things out there that are very politically virtue signaling, sending messages. And why does this happen? Because the churches are getting paid a lot of money by very big corrupt people. They're being funded by different organizations, and this is, I mentioned the Unitarian Church, and a friend of mine was sharing some of this information with me recently on how they were literally ready to just collapse and fold one day. And, like a week later or a month later, whatever it was in time, all of a sudden they had all the funding in the world that they needed. Well, let me tell you, that just doesn't come out of the it's as powerful and beautiful and wonderful as God is, he doesn't just drop money in your lap like that. And the next thing you know, they're virtue signaling and they're on every narrative out there. And I think there's many good members in these churches, don't get me wrong. But it's one of my pet peeves. I would really like to see churches just be churches and focus on God again, as opposed to being political arms. And unfortunately, a lot of religions and churches are pretty much political arms these days. So it's kind of sad. I'd like to see them just get back to doing their thing, which is talking about God, the Bible, whatever. It's like a lot of things, and it's even a lot of spiritual teachers. I'd like them just to get back to their practices, but we're going to see more exposure coming in these areas. So we can expect that to come up. A lot of people are going to see an increase in confidence. And this is always interesting when we have this because, and I'm sorry, as usual, my nose is itchy. um, and that can always be a fine line. There's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. So that boost in confidence for some people will give them the strength to stand up to corruption. That will give them the strength to voice their opinion at a town meeting or, to stand up and say something and to be more vocal. But sometimes that confidence also can get people to make mistakes and to get a little too high and mighty in their ways, and then they get themselves in trouble. And they think that they can get away with things that they can't. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think we'll have a little bit of both. And I think that the other piece of this is some of the things that we could be seeing and experiencing might boost confidence in people in general. There may be little pieces that are coming through where people go, oh, okay, I think there is some hope. Maybe we can do something. Maybe we can have an impact. There may be things that start to give people some faith again that, hey, maybe there is the possibility that I can afford living. Just living these days sometimes is it. We see more things that are supporting self-sufficiency coming through, creating personal strength. So I think that could be lost. Some things have been in motion for a long time and they might finally go through during this time, or there may be more things being initiated during this time. And I think of this, I think a lot of this kind of comes into like what RFK is doing with the health system, supporting people to get off of some of the drugs and seek out the alternative aspects and to, grow your own food and to encourage the farmers to be doing regenerative farming and various things that are really strong in making people strong on their own. Because, obviously, when we get into those things, then when people are strong on their own, they're not as reliant on the government. And when they're not as reliant on the government, they don't fall for things as easily. They don't get pressured into accepting something as easily. And of course, we know our health is a big thing because when our health is strong, then our mind is strong. It cascades through all these other areas. So I think we're going to see more things coming out supporting that self-sufficiency, creating the personal strength, giving people their power back. And that is going to be wonderful. We're going to see more of this freeing people up from being under government control. And I think that that's going to be really positive. A big focus on strengthening communities, states, countries. Again, this self-sufficiency component. And when we strengthen the individual, the communities get stronger. When the communities get stronger, the states get stronger. When the states get stronger, the countries get stronger. And I think every country should be at this point. Ideally, every country wants to be able to take care of the needs of the people in that country and to not have to rely on other countries for their basic needs. Now, there's some countries they can't do that. They don't have the resources, but other countries they can do that. And I think the more that we can make ourselves self-sufficient, even in my own community, there's so many people with so many different expertises and yeah, I may not agree with them politically along the way, but they got a lot of wisdom, a lot of them. They know how to do a lot of things and they've been raised figuring a lot of things out. And that makes us a pretty strong community, even when we don't agree on things. So I think we're going to see more of that, how people can get into that stronger position. We may see more people coming into position that are going to be focused on strengthening their countries, and I think that is really positive. There also, though, may be power battles that come up. Again, the people who are in corruption, the people that are working unethically, the people who want to control everything, the dictators, the tyrants, these types of people, your communist, your socialist systems, they want to clamp down on that power even more. It's like, hey, we don't want you to think that you can do your own thing. We don't want you to think that you can say no to us. And so this can bring some power battles. And I think some people will be forced into these power battles. Some people will be forced to resign or step down because of their corruption. The one thing about corruption, which is so interesting, they just never really seem to surround themselves with very smart people. And when you surround yourself with people who are not very smart, you better not have anything to hide. But corruption always has something to hide. So they always end up exposed because they've surrounded themselves with unwise people. And I think we're going to see more of this. So there's going to be more turning over. And I know this is kind of a ongoing thing. And we talk about it a lot. It comes up a lot. Um, and we've had a lot of turnover. I mean, just look at everything, even in the UK, big turnover there recently. And, I was joking last month, but it's true. The cat is welcoming in. It's another prime minister. It's outlived so many prime ministers already. And here it is bringing in a new one. So, um, definitely interesting to watch it. We're seeing it all over the place in multiple countries and royalty families and power being turned over. So there's all kinds of things coming up. And this is going to bring conflict between opposing leaders. So you have leaders wanting to take one avenue and create peace, for example. You have leaders that want to create war. And that's going to create battles between them at this time. And again, we've got the power battles going on here with this. We're also going to see probably the WHO and the UN coming into spotlight in August as they're seeking a lot of power and control. And I think also they're losing a lot of power and control as the US has pulled out of funding. Do they have a place and a purpose? Yes, but they need to not have authority over what countries can do. There has to be major change in there. And, more countries are starting to find out, whoa, this agreement, the Paris Accord agreement that they wanted us to sign into isn't such a good deal because all of a sudden we don't have say. And I'm thinking to myself, who didn't read these things when it came out? But I think they're going to jump back into the spotlight again. They're going to be seeking more power and control. Some of this is going to be a test run for things that are coming in 2027, kind of testing what can we get away with, who's willing to bend to our authority, who isn't willing to bend to it. They're without the U.S. in them, they're losing a lot of money. It's going to be very hard for them to stay afloat. And here again, we could see turnover in leaders there because I think really the only way for them to survive would be for a turnover in leadership that then brings, for example, the US back in to funding them. But that will have to be more balanced out as well. Now, from the 1st through the 23rd, so just over the first 3 weeks of the month, we need to be helping those who are in need. There's got to be a focus on that. So government programs helping people to, for example, this is going to put a focus on government programs. So in the US, that's our food program, that's our housing program, that is disability programs, Social Security for retirement programs. All of these government programs are going to be really in the spotlight during those first 3 weeks. And again, focusing on it. And I'm actually even seeing in my state, which has got some pretty corrupt leadership in it, to say the least. Even in my own state, we're seeing some of these audits happen and things go through. So this is going to probably put a big emphasis on getting the fraud out of the system, who legitimately needs help and who is just draining the system, who doesn't deserve it, who doesn't need it, cleaning up the records of these things. So we'll probably hear more about how many people have been taken off of these roles, how many people have been removed from these programs. And we have to be careful because the news can always make it sound really scary, like all these people were removed from the programs. But then they don't tell you that those people were dead, that they were illegal, they weren't entitled to it, that they were defrauding the program, that, things like that. So they don't, talk about that. I think also in this component is helping people in their own country get their country back. And they've got to focus on, truly who's truly deprived, who truly is in need versus those people who are just wanting an easy ride. They don't want to do anything. They just want to be given everything. And, this is not what America is set up on. Other countries, they're set up for that. That's a part of the socialist systems. And it doesn't mean that America isn't taking care of those that are in need. We're just not going to pay for the people who don't who aren't entitled for it. You gotta, or the people who are just lazy. So I think a lot coming in on that. This is going to be a time for synchronizing divine rhythms, which is interesting in August. And we've had more coming out about here in the US about stopping the time changes going on. And I think we might have more going through on that. That's all getting pushed through the system right now. That's been talked about for at least a year or two, but it's now finally moving through the system. And, everybody's got their reasons of why they want it to, this daylight savings time to end after the next shift or to end before the next shift. And I always have to remind people you get the same amount of daylight no matter no matter what. It's just, when the sun rises or sets will be a different time. But the bigger thing in this is that, some people, they need that light early in the day. Some people need the light later in the day. Um, you're never going to please everybody around this issue. But I come back to the fact that when we change the time schedules every 6 months, this was really more of a design to create disruption in our natural rhythms, to pull us out of natural rhythms, to pull us out of divine timing. And when we do that, we create a lot of issues for ourselves. It affects things like melatonin in our body. It affects our sleep cycles. It creates a disruption in the body, in the physical body, and it actually wears on our health. It actually wears on our mental well-being. It actually wears on our spiritual, natural connections and our connections with nature. Nature doesn't care what time of day it is. It goes strictly by when the sun rises and when it sets. It doesn't go by an alarm clock. And I think we need to be on these natural rhythms because that does play into our health. That does play into becoming stronger individually and so on in there. So I will say I'm actually pro stopping daylight savings time. I think it just creates too much disharmony and disruption to keep it going. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but I think it's, more's coming out on that, whether it gets passed or whatever during this time, we'll see. We've got to keep a focus on what is truly important. And I think that that is a big thing. A lot of times what people think is important is not as important as they think. And sometimes I know, especially like with Trump, people look at it and go, but that's not important what he's doing. The reflecting pond is not important and things like that. But there are very, very important pieces behind it, which a lot of people are not looking at. Maybe they don't understand. I don't know. But we need to look at what is truly important, what holds real value. And we need to make sure that we are not ignoring those pieces. Of course, we have to bring money in. Of course, there has to be work done. Of course, there has to be, a strong economy and all of that. But we also need to be able to be strong enough in our lives, in our working arena, in our incomes, whatever, to be able to have time with family, to get back to focusing on these things of value. And I think, again, more and more people are shifting in this direction of what's important. And I think that's where some of the people who get lost in the narratives, I think their intentions are good because they're thinking, but feeding the poor is a good thing. And yes, it is a good thing. Taking care of the elderly, yes, it's a good thing. And we need people who will watch out and make sure they speak up if those things aren't being handled. But unfortunately, a lot of them get lost down narratives, and it's not really about those values in the end. There's, you get 5% focused on the value and 95% focused on the corruption and the other distractions and things attached to it. So I think this is the thing. A lot of people are really wanting to know, let's get focused here. Let's get back on track. And I think that if we look at what is being focused on, and we learn about it, that we will start to understand what makes it truly important. And I think that's a big thing. People are seeking a lot of common peace. People are done with the turbulence, the drama, they're worn down. They just want some calm and peace in their life. And I've heard a lot of people say recently, I just want to live my life. I just want to live my life at this point. And I think that's a big consensus. And a lot of this is bringing us back to teaching us how much we have to be grateful for. Like in America, we have so much to be grateful for. You've heard people, coming in from other countries going, wow, we heard all these bad things, but no, they've got all these incredible things in America and all these incredible structures and nice people and all of these great things. And of course, I think that sometimes we can take things for granted, but I think that's true in any country, that people take their basics for granted and they take their freedoms for granted. And part of what we're going through right now is to teach us to stop taking these things for granted, stop taking our abundance for granted, stop taking our ability to have a roof over our head for granted, because there's a lot of countries people aren't getting that. Their living conditions are not as good as what we have. There's a lot of people who aren't taken care of very well. There are countries they're thrilled if they make $30 a month. Well, here in America, you'd have people complaining if they were making $30 an hour. So I know part of that is perspective and the culture somebody's in and how much that money can do for somebody or buy or purchase or work for them. But at the same time, it is a piece that if we are going to have peace and if we are going to have calm in the world, we've got to appreciate what we have. And if we don't appreciate it and we're sitting there calling ourselves, all of these names and demeaning ourselves, and putting ourselves down for having a good life, this isn't going to help us at all. This is going to tear down what we have. This is not being grateful for what we have when we're taking those acts to tear down our wealth and being and making people feel bad and guilty for having a certain skin color or being a certain religion or whatever the case is. We really have to bring this focus back around because our greatest peace and calm comes from being grateful for what we have and learning and acknowledging it. And I think a lot of people don't. You know, it's been 200 years, 250 years since our country was founded. And that's what we're celebrating in the US. And, you know, over the years, we've become very relaxed, right? Very complacent, very comfortable. And now we're having to fight for these things. And I think there's still, sadly, a lot of people out there that don't realize that we are literally fighting to keep our rights, to keep our freedom. And if we can keep that in the United States, there's a lot of other countries that can keep that as well and have that. So it's not just about, hey, keeping greedy Americans alive, as some people would view that perspective. You know, when America is alive and doing well, many other countries are alive and doing well, and many jobs are supported, and many people are kept alive and fed through our abundance and wealth because of how much we then contribute to other countries in one way or another as a result of that. Um, choices are going to play a really critical part in our future. Now, this is mixture because there are some points in the month where our mind is not going to be that clear and making choices, at least really big decisions and signing contracts isn't a very good thing. So we do want to pay attention because things that are being put forward, things that they're making choices on, making decisions on, uh, they might have to be redone. They may come back up again. But we want to look carefully at what they are because they are going to have an impact on our future. And the things that do go through, the things that move forward, some things that the decisions have, you know, already been made on them. They just have to start to be implemented. But we have to learn from our past in this as well. And we have to be clearing our past because if we don't, we're going to make some really poor choices if we haven't learned from what we've already been through in life. Now, the 24th on through the end of the month, so basically that last week of the month, we have the attempts that are going to come up to stir violence. A lot of rebellion energy coming in, people being provoked. So it's usually in this situation, the corruption, people who have things to hide are provoking people who are trying to operate legally, ethically, truthfully, honestly. And so we are going to see some attacks and attempts to get people to react. Personally, we need to not be reacting. We need to catch ourselves. And it's probably going to come from lies. It's probably going to come from narratives. It's going to come from a lot of different directions. You know, you have these power battles going on too. And in those power battles, the opponents are going to try to provoke each other into these reactions. And then when the reactions happen, they can use those reactions against them. We have to be very careful of those people who are in corruption that are trying to provoke violence, though. So I don't really like to be out in the protest arena in this kind of energy because this is where things get dangerous. This is where you've got people who are not thinking, who are just following narratives, and they are just spewing information. Most of them are paid people to spew narratives out there, to recite certain things, to hold a sign up, whatever the case is, and to provoke people. And what we have to do is we have to continue to stay focused on that legal and ethical path. We need to find ways to handle things legally and ethically. And I think this is tricky because I know part of the things that frustrate people with Trump is that he operates legally. He does everything basically by the law. I mean, everything is run by the law and by the Constitution. And sometimes he just knows how to work that, and people don't like it. Sometimes they feel he's very ethical in the process, unethical in the process of doing things. And yeah, I'll be the first to say, you know, like him or not, yes, sometimes he does cross a little bit of lines that can be tricky, but he also has a lot of layers. And sometimes what appears unethical on the surface may not be as unethical when you get into the deeper layers of it. So it's a tricky thing in there. We really need both components in there. And I think sometimes, though, even his ethical pieces, wanting to do things in a way that's fair, wanting to do things in a way that is less destructive, is always his preference. But unfortunately, we have groups and terrorists and countries and people who don't want to operate that way. And sometimes you have to get a little firmer with them in things. So I think that's going to be tough, but we've really got to separate our opinions from the facts. And this is one of the biggest, trickiest things that I see with people is they don't ever really look at the facts. They skew the facts to fit their perception. They skew it to make it what they want. Like a lot of researchers skew the research to get the result they want. And we really have to just get down to the hardcore facts. We need to get our opinions out of it. And this is hard because it means that people, when they start looking at uh, the facts may not add up with what they want it to be, or the facts may not support the people that they want to support. And we're seeing this like Bill Maher and people like that who have been these long-term Democrats that are finally coming out saying, yeah, but the facts are not supporting us. The facts are showing that the certain parties are just not what they used to be. And it's a tricky place to walk in things. Our opportunity in all of this, though, is to clear karma. And when we look at this being part of the energetic pattern, what I see here is we could see more peace deals or more people signing on to peace treaties. Trump's had some of those out there, his administration has had out there. And this is about clearing wars. Um, if we're going to move forward in a favorable direction, we've got to have some peace deals going on. We've got to be focused on that. And we've got to clear the karma of the past. You've got these wars that have been going on in countries for decades, decades and decades and decades, and some of them probably hundreds of years. It's just they've carried them on from generation to generation. And, you've got things in the Middle East that are biblical, and it's crazy when we get into some of this, but we're in a month where we can clear some of this karma if we want to. But to clear it, we've got to get out of the battles and the wars, and we've got to come into peace. So probably, I think Trump is waiting for the so-called right time to bring the peace through Iran, through some of these countries. I think that um, it's about a timing thing with him in some ways. In some ways, I think he's just been trying to give them opportunities to do things in a gentler, easier way, and that's not happening because of who he's dealing with. But I think also it's a timing piece with him, and this could be a time where we start to see the peace come through. And that may be some hard things, hard experiences, right? This is a big learning time, big experiences could be hard experiences to get us into that peace. So it's going to probably bring up some stress and some tension. We're going to have stress and tension for people. And this can lead to addictions, more so in individuals, and more so in certain communities. People are going to be looking to escape. People want to find what makes them feel better. Again, not wanting to deal with things, but we have to deal with things. If we are going to move forward in a favorable direction, we have to stop escaping. We have to stop avoiding the things we don't like and start developing our strengths, start learning, start implementing our wisdom, and start to move forward by facing things. If you try to escape them, all we do is put ourselves in the hand of fate. And when we go into the hand of fate, we have to repeat everything under worse conditions. And we definitely don't want to do that. We definitely want to move towards that favorable direction. So we're going to have to be careful of this. And if you know people who are naturally stressed and tense, this is the time people can go over the edge. This is, when that happens and we have some of these other aggressive energies going on, then you've got two things. Either people will kick addictions or they will go deeper into them, and then that can lead to suicides and other things. And I think that that's a really tough thing. the goal is to have a stronger focus on God, and I think we will see a stronger focus coming out on that, particularly in America, because that is part of the foundations that America was built on. In God we trust. And I think that that is I think that's just something that's going to come forward. And I think we're going to see more things initiated in that direction. And I do hope that more people will lean in that direction, honestly. I think that that's a important piece for people. So, but just know, if you know people who are naturally really stressed, then, be a little tolerant of them. Okay? Know that they're going to be more reactive. Know that they're more prone to do things, help them to not be provoked by people. If you're one of those people under a lot of stress and anxiety, communicate a little bit with people and say, look, I need some of my own space right now, or this is not a good time, or hey, I need to set some things aside right now, whatever the case is. But recognizing that because when people are in stress and tension, they do things that aren't really rational. And so that can make people snap a little bit. We also, under our actions section of the month, this month, and this goes on for all month long, the actions we're going to see coming up it's people are going to be a little hesitant. It's going to be kind of the stop, go, um, on, off kind of energy because there's a lot of uncertainty. So it's kind of like, well, how do I act? I don't know about this and I don't know about that. There's too many uncertain variables. So sometimes that can make somebody appear as if they're not doing anything, but they're trying to really understand the scope of things. They're trying to gather the information they need and find out where people stand. It's very hard to know who to trust and who not to trust. So I think a lot of actions that are going to be taken by people during this time are going to be rooted in trusting themselves or trusting, an inner circle. But I think even at this time, we could see people who have been in inner circles to our leaders not be trustworthy, go into betrayal, go down another road in things. And I think that even people who want to be devoted to somebody may be put in fear. They may be threatened. They may give in to peer pressure. And they may turn on somebody strictly because of peer pressure, because they don't want to stand up and be attacked or be isolated or be cast out or whatever the case is. So this is a time where we're probably going to see some sabotage attempts going on. For those that are in truth and integrity, they may be the ones that are getting sabotaged, and those who are committing crimes, who are working unethically, who are being deceptive and manipulative and that lying and those sorts of things, they're going to be trying to cover their crimes. And of course, this never works because whenever they try to cover their crimes, they get exposed, they expose themselves in things. And I think that that's going to be a huge thing, and they'll be pressuring people to keep their cover up, to help, they're going to be pressuring people to not tell on them. And so we're going to have to be careful, but then I'm always going to be looking at it. Who's being sabotaged? Because the person being sabotaged is the one that's standing in the clear. And of course, even that can be tricky to tell who's being sabotaged or who's pretending to be sabotaged, and it can get pretty messy. So um, actions are going to be a tricky space. But here again, we've got this energy of peace, and peace comes from reconciling the past and offsetting our choices. So we want to be looking at who's trying to offset the past mistakes, who's trying to reconcile people. Those are the people that are, again, moving us in a stronger direction. And this, again, makes me think we're going to see more movement towards people partnering up into these peace agreements and coming into them to create peace. Because I think most countries know at this point we sit in a dangerous position, and there's enough ammunition, enough firepower in the world, and even a couple of countries to take the world out, to take the planet out, basically. So I think people are recognizing we've got to set this past behind us. We've got to set our differences behind us. We've got to reconcile. We've got to come into some agreements. and we've got to find some workable solutions. Otherwise, nobody's having a favorable future. Um, and so again, more partnerships connected to supporting peace. So I know that Trump started that, whatever the peace board was that he started up. I think we'll see more countries sign on to that, honestly. I think there'll be more coming into the Abraham Accords and things like that that we're going to see, and that will be part of bringing some of this peace, reestablishing peace again, getting out of some of the wars. Now, the mindset, the thought piece that we have going on for the month from the 1st through the 9th, almost the first week and a half. Again, a lot of learning by experiencing. It's a very big brainstorming time. So again, not this high action period so much, but more of a brainstorming, a gathering of information. What's going on? What's our position? What's the position of other people, other leaders, other countries? And this is looking at things from a lot of different perspectives, because especially when you have this deception, this uncertainty energy that's going on, you have to stop and think about what it looks like from somebody else's point of view. What, and how does that affect things? You know, if you were sitting in that corrupt leader's mind, what would you be thinking about doing? And so I think looking at these different perspectives, it's going to be a very informational gathering period in here. Also working as a team with others. So that information may be coming in. Trump has a lot of task force and things like that, for example, and these teams set up, and those teams are going to come in and bring their information and their pieces, and then that again helps to accumulate and get a bigger picture of what's happening when you go, okay, this side is doing this country's doing that, these people are thinking about that. Okay, I see all these perspectives, and now I start to see this picture forming of what's likely to happen. But working as a team with others. And matter of fact, Trump just came out, today's the 21st, and this will probably be posted on the 22nd of July. He just came out about how he's working with Netanyahu, and how they are working as a team in regards to Iran. I think we will probably hear more things about that, of these partnerships. And I think this is a different concept for people, because they think, how can he partner with these people? How can he work with these leaders who are so awful or whatever? And I think, again, this is about coming back to more people want peace than they want war. And when we can work as a team, it doesn't mean we're agreeing with everything. It doesn't mean we stand behind the way those leaders rule their countries or things like that necessarily. But when we work as a team, we can actually stop the real dangers. And I think that's going to be the focus in there in this team efforts. And I think some of the things that have to be done require a team. They require partnerships to accomplish them. And Trump's been doing a lot of that under the surface that I'm not sure if a lot of people have paid attention to. A big part of this is looking at how do we break down these dictatorial rules? How do we move these dictatorial leaders out of position, because they were never elected by the people. They were put into position. They were bought. They were placed in those positions. And so a lot of the thought process is, how are we going to break this down? And how are we going to continue removing dictatorial leaders and leaders who are compromised and have sold out? So big focus on that coming in, seeing the value and worth, or the skills and the assets in each other. And that's part of what makes a strong team as well, right? We might be really strong in some things, others might be really strong in other things. If we can partner those skills and those assets together, if we can recognize the skills and the assets that somebody has, that also gives us a bigger perception on what they're going to do and what actions they're going to take. That also opens up other components and pieces that allow us to get a better view of what's happening and what's likely to happen in things. So recognizing all of this, and then knowing, how do we use this? Again, how do we bring these skills and these assets together instead of using them to battle each other, which doesn't get us anywhere in things. Lack of truth and honesty. And I think this is always the tricky thing. And I think this has been one of the big challenges for a lot of people around Iran. It's like, but they've never been truthful and they've never been honest. So how can you make a deal with them? And it does make it tricky to know how to proceed if you're getting false information from people. And that's where you have to sometimes set up these different things to find out who really is telling the truth, who's really going to do something when the pressure is on them. I mean, even Zelensky, there's times that he probably is telling the truth, times he probably isn't. He's wishy-washy all over the place. He's trying to manipulate everybody. But, you can't necessarily trust the guy either. So, if you're getting false information, you're going to make poor decisions. So being able to see past the lies and the deception is going to be a big thing. And one of the things that I think we're going to see is a lot of temptations being put out there. Um, and those temptations can lead us into danger. So we have to be very careful of the temptations that we're being given. And it can bring a lot of hardships if we take the temptations. That's a tricky thing. But at the same time, I think that temptations are going to be a strategy. I think they're part of the strategy of things. And the temptations are going to be dangled to see what they do, just like Trump has done this in the past, like with the Strait of Hormuz and things like that, that it's like, well, I want to see who's going to have my back if I go to war. I want to have, if I have to be in battle, who's going to come in and support me? Who's going to give me a place to land my planes? Who's going to give me this? And again, one of those things that he'll probably be dangling some bait in front of people to see whether they'll take it or not. He'll probably be testing people a lot. And that's a smart strategy because it's better to know where they stand before you need them than to find out when you need them. And that's huge. We also see arrogance can be a downfall. Arrogance can lead to exposure and accountability. So this comes back into those people who are corrupt, who think they're above the law. And that arrogance of thinking I'll never be caught, I'm protected because I've got this whole criminal syndicate network behind me. So nobody's ever going to touch me in this. And that arrogance is going to lead them to do things that will expose their own crimes because they're going to get, again, careless. They think, hey, I'm covered. I'm taken care of. I don't have to worry about it. I can do whatever I want. And that, of course, is going to lead to them being accountable. And I think this is also a big strategy when we look at Trump, is that he'd much rather the criminals expose themselves and bring their own stuff out than him having to do it. And so a lot of times that's what he does. He just gives them the temptation or the bait or whatever, and they almost always take it, and then they expose their own crimes in the process. They trip themselves up, and that's the thing. Criminals always get caught in that cover up piece in there. But at this time, again, I think there's also this mindset, hey, I'm too good to be caught. I won't be caught. So we are going to see a lot of people messing up that are not doing good things. And that's great. Like I said in my book, that's great because if they expose themselves, it's so much easier that way. And we will see accountability. But it's definitely going to be the arrogance piece that leads them to get caught in things. Now, the 10th through the 25th, so we've got 2 weeks in there. Uh, we're going to really find out who is and is not using their power wisely, because if power is misused during this time, it's going to bring some pretty hard falls for people. It's going to be pretty devastating for the people who misuse their power. And this is a time where it can be good for risk. It can be good for gambling, not for gambling, but for risk. And but those risks have to be already thought out. They have to have already been looked at previous to now, previous to this month. And, if it's got a very high chance of paying off, then the risk is worth it. If it doesn't have a high chance of paying off, and it's more of a gamble and it's more like, um, again, I think of somebody like Zelensky in this case, or some of the other leaders out there. Well, I'm going to throw this big gamble that That once Trump's out of office, everything's going to go back to what I want it to be, and or I'm gonna or like Mamdani in New York City. Well, I'm gonna gamble with the my taxes that are coming in and my tax base and my tax revenue, and just hope that what I want is going to pay off, and then I'll have all this money to work with, and I'll be able to keep putting through my socialist communist sort of style system. Well, in that component, it's not going to work because the gambling is going to bring bigger losses and bigger losses. And you look at somebody like him, what's happening? He's taking this gamble that he's going to be able to pull all this money from so-called wealthy people and elite people. Well, what happens? They all just move out of state and move someplace else, and then when that happens, he has no revenue. He doesn't have people because everybody left is drawing on the system and in need, and they can't pay into anything. So it becomes a real big mess, and I think this is going to trip some people up in this. Quality and ethical work will bring successes. So the people who do things so-called right, do things in a quality way, who care about what they're doing, who do it in ethical ways, those are the people we're going to see succeed. So again, I always say, look at it. Look at who's succeeding. Look at who isn't. Know the truth of whether it's a true success or a false success or an illusionary success. But the people in the true successes, what are they doing? Because those successes can't come through unless they're working ethically, unless they're doing quality work and caring about things. People from the past resurface, and I'm not sure who these people are going to be, but they are evaluated for changes. So people that maybe were sitting on the other side of the fence, maybe are going to be tested to see if they have actually made changes. And I think there are some corrupt players out there who maybe were just trapped. They felt the pressure, they got trapped into a bad situation, they got scared, so they followed things, they stayed with things. There can be different components like that. There are people that remember the so-called old Democratic Party, that really were fighting for some worthy causes, or that really were trying to uphold aspects of democracy. And then, in that process, they just lost it like that. They just stayed with the party because maybe they felt the pressure. Maybe they didn't want to admit that the party was changing. Maybe they couldn't see it. But we may see some people that shift over. Shift over again, somebody like Bill Maher, who's always been very much on the Democratic Party, which is now calling his own party out, saying they're communists, basically. Um, I think we can see it. I think there may be some people that are shifting gears in here. So I think that's going to be interesting to see um, who actually has made changes, who hasn't made changes, but definitely some people being brought back up into the spotlight again. And I am one of those people. I think sometimes people who are corrupt are always going to be corrupt, but I think there are people who change, and if they learn that the path they're on is not going in a favorable direction, or that they've been lied to, or they've been given wrong information or whatever, I believe that there are definitely those people who change. I mean, I know I'm not the same person I was, even a few years ago, let alone 10, 20, 30 years ago. So I think I think that's going to be a big thing. And I think we'll be kind of finding out who has and hasn't shifted or changed or made adjustments. And then these last week of the month, the last few days of the month, not even a full week, the 26th on through the end of the month, a lot of learning about what does and doesn't work going on here. So again, a lot of kind of taking in information, not so much the big decision making happening, but taking in the information so that we will be able to make wise decisions. And sometimes you just have to try things. And I think that again, Trump is one of those people, he's not afraid to try things. just to find out whether it will work or not, or just to find out where somebody is at in something. So again, a lot of learning, and I think people in general are starting to learn more. I think we will see more about, we could see more things come out environmentally, in regards to, look, these things that you've been told are great things don't really work. Some of these energy sources, some of these things, they're just not practical and they're just not reasonable and they don't really work. It doesn't work if people can't afford to pay their electric bill. We're one of the highest electric pricing here in Maine out of anywhere in the country. We've seen a lot of different things along this line and a lot of things pushed. So I think there's a lot more understanding coming out about what does and does not work and why it does. Again, people not realizing, most people don't realize that oil, pure clean oil, to use for gasoline and in our cars and stuff is a renewable source. It actually does renew itself. And there is a lot of different components there. And likewise, there are some, so-called green initiatives, environmental initiatives that really are not saving wildlife. They're actually causing more detriment than benefits in there. So a lot of these kind of learning things, and I think this is going to be a big period where people are going to be getting shown more and more on how to handle things, how to apply things, how to apply the wisdom and the knowledge into action. And I think that's kind of a learning phase that we're going to be seeing come out. So these last few days, the things may start to click in where they see, okay, we now know how to put this into action. We've had this idea, we've had this concept. Now we know how to put it into action. People are learning a lot about what to watch, how to observe things, how to look beneath the surface, how to see what's really happening. So more coming out, helping people just learn how to identify, for example, truth from lies, that sort of thing. Observing the pros and the cons, because pretty much in everything we have pros and cons. There's probably no absolute perfect solution out there. There's going to be pros and cons with everything. And we have to look at that and weigh those things out. And we have to consider multiple perspectives of things, okay? This might sound really great from a government perspective, but what does it look like from the average person's perspective? It may mean nothing to them. It may do no value. It might even be detrimental. Who's impacted by what? What does it look like if you're rich versus middle class versus poverty or homeless or things like that? What does it look like when you're doing this in America versus if you're doing it in the UK or Australia or Japan or China or wherever else? So looking at these multiple perspectives, again, so a lot of gathering of information coming in. Temptations to sacrifice ethics, again, is about showing true loyalty. So I think that the carrots, the proverbial carrots, are going to be dangled in front of people to see who will take what. And I think that's going to be true within our own government structures, with different countries, with individual people on task force and whatever else. The carrots are going to be dangled, and we're going to see who's going to bite. We're going to see who's going to go after them, and this is going to show us a lot about who is and is not loyal, and ethical in things. And we're going to have some patience. So this is one of those things where people will be thinking, you know what, maybe we need to just wait a little bit. What if we wait a week? What if we wait a month? And this is where we can learn that sometimes it's worth waiting for something. I know a lot of people are so anxious to have so many things happen in our world, but you can't just rush into things, because if you rush into things, you oftentimes will not get the result you're hoping to get or that you need to get. Um, you have to do things in a proper order, so to say, or a little bit of patience, as opposed to, having a criminal put in jail for 2 years. You might have him put away for life if you have a little bit of patience. You might, with a little bit of patience, stop a whole drug cartel versus stopping one drug dealer. And that's the kind of scale that we're looking at with this. We've got to be a little bit patient, and there are definitely things that are worth waiting for if we will do that. Again, a lot of seeing past the lies and illusion, and that's the thing, these mind games, a lot of lies and illusions being used to create these mind games that are going on in things. Um, Moving on to the soul energy, of course, this is the energy that I like to cover this. It won't be broken down the same way when we move into 2027, but the soul energy is really taps into where people's hopes are, what feels possible, what's in the heart energy, what is uh, meaningful in a way for people. And from the first through the sixth, what we have going on is to nourish that soul energy, to bring some comfort, to bring some peace to people, things need to be done in a practical and responsible way. So I think that this is very important. I think that this also holds things in integrity. Are people keeping their promises? Are they meeting their obligations and their responsibilities? And I think that that is going to be very important in keeping hope up for people, in keeping people feeling like we are moving in the right direction with things. And so they've got to see people taking action, following through on things. If they've said they're going to do something, people want to see it happen. And I think that that is going to be one of the ways that practical, responsible action is going to be one of the ways we nourish the soul or the divine energy in our world. Many people want to move forward, but there is work that's got to be done. Again, we got to have a little patience. We got to put in the effort. We got to face the challenges that are there with us. Um, and we've got to release things like the hatred, the revenge, the grudges, the judgments, and the past. Again, we've got to reconcile. We got to reconcile the differences to move forward. We've got to have forgiveness of what has happened in the past so that we can move on. And this is a big piece. People are anxious to move forward, but but we've got to put in the effort. We've got to put in the work. And that is just so very important to do. We're not going to get the results if we don't. And it's worth taking our time to do it right, as they say. Um, we must allow for divine will. So there's a lot of people that want things to happen. They want them to happen now. They want it to happen the way they want it to happen. You've got people on both sides of the fence that are hoping whoever on the other side of the fence is going to take a dive and get out of the picture or whatever the case is. But we've also got to allow for divine will, because if we allow the divine will to be a guiding tool in things, then we're going to come into some of our more favorable outcomes along the way. If we're busy trying to only force our own will and only our own wants and desires and things, and we're not taking care of the needs of people, and the real needs of things, then we're working against divine will, and that will always end up backfiring on us. So hopefully we will find those people or see some of those people that are in higher profile positions aligning with divine will. And that means that sometimes they're just going to see how things play out. They're not going to force one outcome or another in that kind of a situation. We need to lovingly and thoroughly end things. So we need to consciously end it, because if we don't consciously end it, again, we have to repeat things under harder conditions. We bring harsh endings to things. That's when we start to see more of the literal and proverbial death coming forward. So again, we've got to face the issues at hand, and this can really push people to some breaking points, but we've got to hang on. We've got to hang on and keep moving through it. And this is a powerful time that we can do some transformational work in this energy with this. And we need to use caution. Um, there's accident energy present, danger energy present. So we have to be cautious. Again, another reason to not just rush through things, because you rush through things, you create an accident, then you create more issues to deal with, you create more problems to deal with. And a little bit of caution could go a long way to things going smoothly versus things becoming a disaster. And we need to be careful in things. We've got to have patience to observe things, to observe what's happening. Again, not rush. We need to look from all these perspectives. We need to find ways to reconcile. Okay, I know, you sit there and you got two world leaders, and one world leader is saying, well, this is what I want, and the other world leader is saying, this is what I want. But to reconcile and to come into these peace deals, you have to look at it from their perspective and come to something that is fair. In other words, instead of just digging our heels in, we have to be able to say, well, I can understand how they would want this for this country, for their country, or this is really their critical resource, and it's not right to deprive them of their core resource that allows them to do trade in the world, or so there's a variety of things along those lines. And we've got to have patience to do that. And this is going to require letting go of inferiority or superiority complexes. Everybody again has their pros, their cons. Everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses. Every country does, every leader does. And we have to stop being in that position and start saying, okay, let's come to some agreements. Let's come to some deals. Let's find a middle ground of some sort that is good for both of us. And let's see what we can come up with. We need to know and understand others. Again, the more we know and understand each other, the more we observe people and we learn about them and experience what they are doing, what they're thinking, things like that, the more we can come into this reconcile process. And then we also need time to process things. So there could be again, a little stagnant period. This is also coordinating with that brainstorming time frame, and a little stagnant period to just process things, to just go, okay, I need some time to think about things. I need time to digest things. I need to let things sit a little bit, ponder on them. And again, that is better than just rushing into something and making poor decisions just to get through it. So taking that time to process, we'll see some of that. And so don't feel like there's no movement happening. There are things happening. The action just may not be super strong and aggressive in that first week. From the 7th on, strong advancement happening. So if we've taken the time in that first week to kind of gather ourselves together, right, come into that divine alignment, come into that God connection, whatever you want to say there can be strong advancement for those who are nourishing divine presence in the world. And that's a great thing, that rapid, sudden advancement that goes through. In other words, hey, we've thought about our plans, boom, let's execute them, let's go. Again, not having to make decisions because the decisions should have already been made. Now it's the execution time for implementing things and doing things and getting things done. And I think that's exciting for some people when they see these strong advancements. That does give people hope. That does build their confidence up, as we've talked about. But the flip side of that coin is that when those who are working for the good, who are nourishing divine presence, who are nourishing good things in the world, make rapid advancement, it brings retaliation from those who are in corruption, who are working from ill intention. And there is going to be some backlash for that advancement. And it's probably going to be pretty harsh. The types of things that we see, this is going to probably bring out military and particularly even naval forces being deployed. And they'll be deployed in two different ways. One as a way to trigger war and to try to generate and create war, or they could be used for self-defense purposes. And I think that this is going to come more into the waterways. So Strait of Hormuz could still be on the aspect. They could be setting up defenses all around port areas or canals or other, major trading areas where ships are passing through. So there could be some attacks going on that way. And again, it can be hard to see who's on which side of the fence or the other. We also will probably see some assassinations or assassination attempts during this time. And again, this can go both ways, right? Because there could be strong, rapid progression and movement that happens. For example, if Iran isn't coming to any deals and they're not going to follow what needs to be followed, then they could have stuff blown up. They could have more leaders taken out. They could have a lot of things happening with that. And then, likewise, the corrupt leaders may be saying, hey, we're going to retaliate and take one of your leaders out because you took one of our leaders out. So we can see a lot of this twisting and turning in this dynamic in here. Mostly assassinations are happening with high profile people. They're not usually happening on the lower rungs, unless somebody has shifted their tune, made a change. They're changing parties, political parties, or changing what they're going to support, or in some way are a bigger threat. I mean, we could see it in senators and governors and things like that too. But again, the higher profile somebody is, the more likely that's where it's going to hit. The average person on the street normally is not experiencing this. There could be threats made to high profile influencers, but at the same time, again, it's more scare tactics than assassinations. But of course, if you combine that with the accident energy, something that could be originally designed as a scare tactic could turn into a death in that situation. Abuse magnifies where the abused try to escape their abusers. So again, these countries who are really violent, like you have some countries out there who are very violent, for example, on women. Women that want to drive, that's a crime in their country. Women who want to, show anything other than their eyes, it's a crime in their country. They're very abusive. And if any women, for example, stand up in those countries, the abuses will get stronger. That's going to be another part of this kind of assassination energy that we could see, where there could be attacks on the abused if they try to stand up. So it's a tricky space for people. And again, because this is falling in the soul arena, this could have more connection to belief systems or cultural practices, or attacks made on people who are priests or ministers or religious or spiritual of some nature, or they could have a spiritual connection to them. Drama, turbulence, unexpected upheaval, anything to keep the chaos going, because when chaos is present, it's very hard for people to think clearly. People tend to panic. They tend to go into frantic mode, stress, anxiety, and then they can't think reasonably and they become more compliant. But this energy also brings up a lot around like weather, storms, natural disasters, unexpected weather patterns hitting, and that can be very devastating as well. The caution in this that I think can be hard on somebody's spirit is miscommunications or misunderstandings. And this, again, is why we have to look at things from so many different perspectives. We have to do that follow-up. We have to do that clarifying. And this is where we probably will see different, again, a lot of false narratives in the news, a lot of misinformation, disinformation in the news channels. Again, trying to create chaos. They're going to use this miscommunication to create misunderstandings in people, in order to get them to think that something is different than what it is, to create the drama, to create the chaos, to create the upheaval, through misrepresenting things. And some of those reporters will do it deliberately, and some of them will have misunderstood things themselves and reported based on their misunderstanding instead of the truth of things. So again, we got to take things with a grain of salt and give them a little time to play out. The key is for us to remain calm, because yes, this turbulence is going to come up, but we need to remain calm in it. We need to not let ourselves get too swept away in it. Most of this stuff, again, is playing out with bigger, higher profile people, and we're not directly involved in it. And we have to let things happen that are going on, and just stay calm. Stay calm through it all. Don't get into the frenzy. Don't get swept up in the narratives. Don't get swept up in the provocations and the triggers and all of that type of stuff. We need to listen to God. We need to listen to our intuition. And that's always the core piece. I mean, God's always going to be honest with us. Our intuition is really pretty accurate a lot of the times. But the tricky part, the part that trips us up a lot with our intuition is when we are following our will as opposed to God's will. And then we believe that we're getting a message from God when it's really our desires that are wanting something, that we're trying to justify in a way on a subconscious level. So we have to do that. But if we're truly listening to God, to our intuition, we're going to be kept safe. We're going to be protected through things. We're going to be staying on track with a positive direction to go. We may see periods of breaks or what appears as inaction going on again during this time. And a lot of that, again, is this having to stop and reevaluate, looking at things from different perspectives, having to gather information, having to connect with teams, having to coordinate with partners. So, not not inaction is not always inaction. There may be a lot happening. It just may not look like it, or it may not be in the visible public as much. But I think there is plenty going on with that. So that kind of wraps us up for the month of August and what's happening in our political arenas, our world global event type arenas. And hopefully you found the information useful. Hopefully you found it valuable. If you have, share out the video and give it a like, give a comment, subscribe to the channel. Again, I put one out about once a month here. I'm not promoting all the time every day on here. It's about as much as I can handle to do one of these a month, which is why I've broken it up by the months in here because I stay pretty busy outside of that. Again, if you want to check out the work, these insights are all in this book, The Code Journey. And on my website, compassioncodes.com, you'll find the books tab. You'll see the code journey. You can go in there, take a look at it. And while this is a kind of a personal guide tool, spiritual almanac, as I like to refer to it, it also gives us insights about what can happen in the political arena and what can be happening on a global scale as well in there. So these videos just help to clarify some of that information more specific to this area. And, so you may want to pick yourself up a copy. Of course, August 15th, I'll be releasing the 2027 edition. You can get the ebook at a discounted rate right now. So if you want to do that, it gives you a way to check out the content and what the content is like before going in and purchasing the paperback. It's a pretty big book, so I like to have the paperback on hand. But some people like both. Some people like the ebook for one reason or another, because they're just like the content in there and they just need the content. But whatever works for you, there are direct links to purchasing on that page for the Code Journey. And with that, I will be coming back to you next month at the end of August, and we'll be taking a look at the month of September. Take care, everybody.